So in early September, some cultural vandal at the website What Do I Know took Kobold Press to task for basically nothing. They take Kobold Press to task for cultural tourism or some such, as well as complaining that the concept of races in RPGs has something to do with biological determinism in real life or something. I'll see if I can link the thing where I'm pointing here. And amazingly, instead of completely ignoring this maniac, 2 days later, Kobold Press responds with this. Hopefully that works. Now, I want to talk about the statement, real-life cultures are not playgrounds for characters to run wildly in. Because a lot of LOTFP stuff is situated in real-world Earth, and so we definitely do make use of real-world cultures. So I know that the statement is fundamentally and completely incorrect. If you think that settings and cultures in your game should be portrayed accurately and with respect, that's okay. Knock yourself out. But if you use different locations and cultures as just flavor backdrops for whatever main thing you have going on, James Bond or Fast and the Furious running wild style, that's perfectly okay too. The people that don't see that as something to be allowed, I'm increasingly confused as to what some people think role-playing games even are, or even if they approve of the very concept of imagination. I mean, yeah, I have a point of view about how things should be done, and this thing isn't doing that, so I don't like it. It's like, that's one thing. You like what you like. I don't like it, so it should be changed. Well, it's an understandable impulse because you want to like more things, but that should have absolutely zero authority or consequence when you're told to just stick it. I mean, we agree, and we have immediately changed the decade-old thing we published because we caused harm. I mean, to me, that sets off all sorts of alarm bells, that something really fucked up has just happened, and I don't mean the original text. I mean, I can't imagine a more totalitarian impulse than to demand contrition for committing acts of imagination. And I can't imagine any clearer submission to the totalitarian impulse than to actually show contrition for those acts of imagination. See, the correct way to publish is to get across the ideas that you want to convey. Even if, no, especially if it runs counter to the ideas that other people want to convey. Otherwise, what is the point of you as an individual to create? It's for your voice, not someone else's voice through you. So the correct way to play is whatever works at your table, even if it would be an utter disaster at any other table. Imposing any real universal rules concerning imagination and the exercise thereof onto others, acting like everyone should think the same way about anything, it's rather shit. Orthodoxy in a creative space is death. Regardless of the pretensions some people have about RPGs as a medium, and I am not excluding myself from that, they're games. They're side entertainments. They are not the main things in life to the vast majority of people who play them. And here's some help if you just want to fuck around a bit, has to be a valid way to approach these things. Although, in the original complaint, quote, an intentional lack of empathy being an undesired viewpoint in the industry, it made me feel very seen, you know? Although fundamentally, I don't know how you properly do horror without seeking empathy as your way in, rather than something to be fortified in the work. I mean, is it even horror if you're protecting the audience's sensibilities against whatever narrative you're presenting? And the fact that in RPGs, the audience is the player, so not exactly a passive receptacle, but an active set of agents within the narrative, is what makes the medium so wonderful. And as a creator, putting forth a situation where the narrative fractures the audience, and you get to sit back and just watch Ben and Mr. Cooper fall into conflict about the best way to solve the greater problem, that is the ultimate. And you have to have that let them fight attitude to it all, because you've successfully broken them. And it's their job, not yours, to recognize and fix the situation. The idea that in-game materials must match correct real-world thinking is a complete non-starter. Playing a role-playing game is not an exercise in strengthening real-world morality. It is not the duty of fiction to uphold or support social mores as they currently exist, or how one thinks they should exist. You can do that if that's what you want to do, but that's something you're putting on it. That's not something that it is inherently supposed to be doing. So, and the original complaint, going into how Kobold Press is supporting bioessentialism in fantasy races, which to me, I know the demi-humans in the LOTFP rulebook are mainly a legacy compatibility marker and aren't much seen in the supplementary material, although, use them if you want. If we'd gone off in another direction of fucked up fantasy rather than pseudo-historicalism, the demi-human races would be so completely inhuman as to be alien, with elements that would make it very difficult for them to be in the same player character group. Green Messiah's take on the elf isn't where I would have gone with it, but it is a demonstration of player character race as incompatible with others. But in the end, LTFP doesn't use them elves or orcs or whatever, because they're typically just portrayed as some variant of human anyway, and if that's the case, it either makes players think more about stabbing another actual human in the game instead of an orc, or it requires them to let go of standard morality altogether, and then they become part of the game's horror. So, example. You'll like this. One famous game designer pitched me an idea once. It was over a decade ago, once he saw what it was that I was doing. His suggestion was just redo Keep on the Borderlands, as is, except people versus orcs. It's the Portuguese setting up a fort in India, and you just present it straight up. Civilization is in this fort, and we need to clear out the other and take their stuff, as the original does, but without any additional commentary or moralizing on what you're doing. Nothing of the sort. Just, here are the colonizers, and here are the people that, and just run it straight Keep on the Borderlands style. Not because that would all be good, but because holy shitballs, that is so fucked up, and the dread would be inescapable. I don't think he ever actually intended to go anywhere near such a project himself, but he did understand what it is we do here when we're on point. So, anyway. But when it comes to heroic fantasy type games, I don't care about this as much, because that's not my playground. So who gives a fuck? But when it comes to dark fantasy or horror, this is all very important. And it's why I complain so much about fake dark. If you're pulling your punches, if you're doing something dark, but then making sure the audience is shielded from feeling the effects of that darkness, then you're lying. You are a fraud. Fuck off.